Good afternoon. I am Senator Valerie Foushee, Chair of the North Carolina Black Alliance, and serving my fifth term as a member of the North Carolina General Assembly. On behalf of our Executive Board and our member affiliates, we welcome you to our 16th annual NC Black Summit. This annual gathering of elected officials, community advocates, and supporters has become one of the premier events for North Carolina elected officials. Our theme this year is building political power in uncertain times. We are resilient in how we respond to crisis and challenges that impact our families and communities, remembering our heritage and that we rise in the face of adversity. Over the next 24 hours, we will collectively engage in learning opportunities to identify solutions and strategies that allow us to better support the communities that we serve. This year, we are offering special accommodations via closed caption. You can activate this feature by selecting the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. Kicking off this year's event is a warm welcome from Governor Roy Cooper, who will greet our audience and provide reflections from the Capitol.
Hi everybody, Roy Cooper here. Welcome to the 2022 NC Black Summit. Wish I could be with you in person as I normally am, but at least this gives me a chance to say hello and thanks. Thanks to the North Carolina Black Alliance for organizing this summit to bring together elected officials, public policy experts, and community advocates. Here you'll have the opportunity to discuss critical policies in our state. Your work is helping to strengthen North Carolina. And I want to be sure to thank Chairwoman and State Senator Valerie Foushee for her leadership and dedication. I appreciate you, Valerie, working closely with me on so many efforts to stop bad things and to leverage the good. Here in North Carolina, we're focused on emerging even stronger than before from this pandemic. And throughout all these tough 2 years, we focused on getting supplies and vaccines and boosters out quickly and equitably. We partnered with local churches and community groups to get shots into arms. And we were recognized as a leader in the nation for reporting demographic data and administering shots fairly. You can't tackle the problem unless you can see it, and this data helped us close the gaps. Our historically underutilized businesses strengthen our economy and our community. And our hub office is continuing to provide direct support to minority and women-owned businesses. As we continue to move toward a clean energy economy, we must ensure that it's also fair, sustainable, and less costly for all. We're focused on centering environmental justice and equity while fighting climate change. And voting is one of the most fundamental rights in our democracy, probably the most fundamental. And I'll keep fighting to ensure that it's fair and accessible to everybody. We've made significant progress, but we all know there's more to do. I look forward to continuing our work together and building a stronger, more equitable North Carolina for all. Keep up the great work, guys. Thanks so much.
Our member affiliate groups support the work of the Alliance through monetary commitments and memberships. These commitments propel our work with various community initiatives throughout the state. These long-term partnerships have strengthened our impact and established a strong collective collaboration among our elected officials. Our member organizations include the North Carolina Association of Black County Officials, North Carolina Black Elected Municipal Officials, North Carolina Caucus of Black School Board Members, North Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Foundation. Each will bring you greetings.
On behalf of the North Carolina Association of Black County Officials, or NCABCO, welcome to the 16th Annual North Carolina Black Summit, the virtual experience. I am Renee Price, immediate past president of NCABCO. Our theme this year is building Black political power in uncertain times. As a people, African Americans or Black people, we have encountered uncertain times for over 400 years. Yet, we have persevered with unfathomable faith and hope in achieving our freedom and demanding power. Now we must sustain that spirit and that momentum. Thank you for joining us as we strategize and build a legacy of Black political power. Enjoy the summit.
Hello, my name is Valerie Jones. I'm the immediate past president for the North Carolina Black Elected Municipal Officials, NCBMO. I'd like to welcome you to our 16th annual North Carolina Black Summit, where our theme this year is building Black political power in uncertain times. Again, welcome.
Good morning and welcome to the 16th annual North Carolina Black Summit. My name is Clinton Williams, and as the current president of the North Carolina Caucus of Black School Board Members, I bring you greetings on behalf of the Executive Board, the Board of Directors, and each of its members. For many years, the North Carolina Caucus of Black School Board Members has been affiliated with this great organization, and we are pleased to be a part of your 2022 North Carolina Black Summit. The summit's theme, Building Black Political Power in Uncertain Times, is perfect in this era when equity is the buzzword in all arenas. The educational setting is a focal point where equality and equity is germane to the work of the North Carolina Caucus of Black School Board Members, and the contributions and support that we have been afforded by the North Carolina Black Alliance has supported us to address a host of issues impacting Black and children of color. I want to thank you, Ms. Katisha Phillips, the members, and the participants for allowing the inclusion of the North Carolina Caucus of Black School Board Members. I wish you much success during your 16th annual Black Summit.
The North Carolina Legislative Black Caucus brings you greetings as we come together to work across party lines and join forces to build stronger communities within our state of North Carolina. The caucus has worked tirelessly against hair discrimination within the workplace, funding for HBCUs, and police accountability. We continue to work on ensuring access to the polls for fair voting districts and preventing voter intimidation. I am Attorney Nastasia Watkins, the liaison for the caucus and the Black Alliance, and we welcome you to the 16th Annual North Carolina Black Summit.
People get ready, there's a train coming. Don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the diesel humming. Don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord. That's why we waiting on the world to change. We keep on waiting on the world to change. Me and all my friends, we're all misunderstood. They say we stand for nothing, and there's no way we ever could. You see, everything that's going on with the world and those who lead it, feel like we don't have the means to just rise above and beat it. That's why we waiting on the world to change. We keep on waiting on the world to change. It's hard to beat the system when you're standing at a distance. That's why we waiting on the world to change. If we had the power to bring our neighbors home from war, they would have never missed a Christmas and no more ribbons on the door. See, when you trust your television, what you get is what you got. Cause when they own the information, oh, they can bend it all they want. That's why we're waiting waiting on the world to change. We keep on waiting, waiting on the world to change. That's why we're waiting, waiting on the world to change. We keep on waiting, waiting on the world to change. That's why we're waiting, waiting on the world to change. We keep on waiting, waiting on the world to change.
Our commitment statements have served as our guiding principles and roadmap for the work we do in various communities throughout North Carolina. Access to healthcare and environmental justice, crime and justice, economic empowerment, education, political effectiveness, and personal responsibility. We recommit ourselves to these commitments during the summit. This year will be no different as we creatively showcase them during this video presentation.
The North Carolina Black Alliance Commitment Statements. Political effectiveness and personal responsibility. We believe representative government works best when there is an informed, engaged, and active voting population. Policymakers must be equipped with the knowledge of the needs of the communities they purport to serve, and an awareness of the consequences of those policies on the effective citizens. We commit ourselves to be strongly engaged in the political process, identify, research, and advocate for issues of concern in African Americans. We commit to mobilize the electorate through registration and education, to eliminate barriers to voting participation, to monitor the records and actions of those elected or seeking election, and to hold them accountable. We commit to invest the appropriate financial resources to ensure equitable representation at all levels of government. Crime and justice. We believe all citizens desire an environment that is safe, healthy, and free of crime. Too often, African Americans find themselves with circumstances where these conditions are not assured. Safe communities must begin by establishing an environment that does not breed crime, where economic opportunity exists, and where the community rewards and supports good behavior. Corresponding to this role of the community is a responsibility to society to create a justice system that is fair and equitable. To that end, we commit ourselves to diversity of the courts at all levels, particularly the election and the appointment of African American judges. We commit ourselves to the fairness and enforcement, including officer and leadership diversity and elimination of racial profiling practices. We commit ourselves to ending sentencing disparities, including the death penalty. We commit ourselves to the proper response to youth violence and gang initiatives in our schools and our communities. We also commit ourselves to advocate for environmental justice to ensure that the quality of water and air in communities of color is not contaminated and that we eliminate inequalities in the locations of environmentally hazardous facilities and enterprises. Education. We believe the promise of America can only be fully realized when all citizens are assured an opportunity to receive a quality education. We believe access to that opportunity begins at birth and includes other opportunities to appropriate daycare, quality elementary and post-secondary education, and to technical colleges, schools, and universities. We commit ourselves to providing an appropriate climate for learning through investment in quality facilities that are safe in the education and recruitment of diverse educators and administrators, to rid the classroom of bias, to encourage the full development of the individual, and to eliminate disparities in funding based upon student achievement, the wealth of the surrounding communities, or family financial stability. We commit ourselves to the elimination of achievement gaps in all aspects of education. Economic empowerment. We believe the labor, intellect, and skills of African American citizens have been essential to this society, contributing to American status as the world's strongest economy. Our efforts have not been rewarded by an appropriate share of the country's wealth. We therefore commit ourselves in practice and in policy to expanding the wealth of African American citizens by supporting a living wage for all workers, by continuing support of affirmative action, by advocating for fair and equitable pay in all jobs. We commit to encourage savings and investments by our community, support entrepreneurship, and ensure openness and participation in contracting processes, and to fight discriminatory and exploitative practices in lending, to promote awareness of business and wealth building practices in communities of color, to encourage ownership of residences and businesses, and to foster ideas for community improvement and wealth retention. And lastly, access to healthcare and environmental justice. We believe every American should have access to healthcare in the time of injury or illness. We believe it is a travesty that millions of Americans are without coverage and proper medical care because of lack of personal resources. We commit ourselves to the adoption of universal access to healthcare for all Americans and for the improving the quality of care and availability of healthcare professionals in low-wealth communities, especially those communities of color. We also commit ourselves to support funding for research for those illnesses that disproportionately affect African Americans and to engage and support appropriate funding for educational programs relating to healthy lifestyles, including diet, exercise, and the abuse of addictive substances.
Each year, we celebrate our political history makers who are committed public servants in communities around the state. This year, I had the pleasure of having a fireside chat with the following three North Carolina history makers. The Honorable Eva Clayton, former representative of the North Carolina Congressional District 1. The Honorable Mel Watt, former representative, North Carolina Congressional District 12, and Representative G.K. Butterfield, North Carolina Congressional District 1. This conversation will be immediately followed by a conference break and scheduled to resume at 5:30 p.m. Well, good afternoon. We are excited to convene three of North Carolina's inspiring and notable public servants for our annual History Makers opening plenary discussion. We have with us today the Honorable Eva Clayton, the Honorable Mel Watt, and the Honorable G.K. Butterfield. Thank you and welcome to each of you. By way of introduction, the Honorable Eva Clayton. Eva M. Clayton is the first African-American woman elected to represent North Carolina in Congress and the state's first Black representative since 1901. Prior to serving in Congress, she was a Warren County Commissioner, Assistant Secretary to the North Carolina Department of Natural and Community Development, and Director of the Soul City Foundation. In Congress, she was recognized as a leader, elected as the president of her Democratic freshman class, served on the Agriculture Committee, and was the ranking member of the subcommittee, Nutrition and Operations. In Congress, she fought for Black farmers and was influential in writing and passing the 2002 Farm Bill, which provided additional assistance to small farmers, increased resources for SNAP, known as food stamps, and expanded school lunch programs across the country. Congresswoman Clayton helped secure federal resources for various communities in her district. Upon leaving Congress, Clayton accepted a 3-year assignment as Assistant Director General with the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization in Rome, Italy. She headed up the International Alliance Against Hunger, which was composed of the 4 UN agencies related to agriculture and food, to create national alliances that express the will to end hunger and malnutrition. While at FAO, she and her team organized partnership alliances to fight against hunger and malnutrition in 24 different countries, including the United States. In retirement, Congresswoman Clayton remains committed to ending hunger and malnutrition and advocates for rural communities. She encourages young persons to be engaged, and she serves on several boards dedicated to those missions. The Honorable Mel Watt. A lawyer from Charlotte, North Carolina, the Honorable Melvin Mel Watt served one term as a North Carolina senator and as campaign manager for Charlotte Mayor Harvey Gantt. As a former member of the U.S. House of Representatives for North Carolina's 12th Congressional District, he served from 1993 to 2014. During his 11 terms in the U.S. Congress, he served as a vocal advocate for civil liberties and sought to build ties to business interests from a prominent seat on the Financial Services Committee. Born into poverty, Watt brought a unique perspective to a district known for its banking industry. Quote, "People look at you in a suit as a member of Congress, and they think you've always been in a suit and always been a member of Congress," he once said. "I came out of a different kind of history," end quote. In Congress, he served on the Banking, Finance, and Urban Affairs Committee, later named Financial Services. He also served as chair of its subcommittee on oversight and investigations and the subcommittee on domestic monetary policy and technology. He was also assigned to the Judiciary Committee and served as the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee's subcommittee on commercial and administrative law. Additionally, he served on the Post Office and Civil Service Committee and the Joint Economic Committee. Congressman Watt was unanimously elected chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus from 2005 to 2007. In Congress, he established a reputation as an independently minded liberal. On May 1st, 2013, President Barack Obama nominated Watt to lead the Federal Housing Finance Agency, which, among other agencies, administers or has oversight for the FHA, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac. He served as director until 2019. He is married to Yolanda Watt, and they have two sons, Brian and Jason, both of whom are graduates of Yale University. He is also a member of the Mount Olive Presbyterian Church, as well as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Sigma Pi Phi fraternity, and is involved in numerous professional, community, and civic boards and organizations. And finally, Congressman G.K. Butterfield. He is a lifelong resident of Eastern North Carolina. Raised in Wilson, he spent his formative years attending Charles H. Darden High School and worked tirelessly in the civil rights movement as a young adult. His parents were Dr. and Mrs. G.K. Butterfield, Sr. His father practiced dentistry for 50 years and served as one of North Carolina's first Black elected officials since Reconstruction. His mother was a classroom teacher for 48 years. Congressman Butterfield received his undergraduate and law degrees from North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina. After earning his law degree, Congressman Butterfield founded a law practice in Wilson and served the community in that capacity for 13 years. He is best known for his successful litigation of voting rights cases that resulted in the election of African Americans elected officials throughout Eastern North Carolina. In 1988, Congressman Butterfield was elected as a resident Superior Court judge. In this role, he presided over civil and criminal court in 46 counties in our state. For 2 years, he served on the North Carolina Supreme Court by appointment of the governor. Butterfield retired from the judiciary after 15 years of service and successfully ran for Congress. He was elected to serve the 1st District of North Carolina in the U.S. House of Representatives in a special election in July 2004, and he continues to serve today. In Congress, Butterfield is a champion for affordable health care, education, investments in rural communities, veterans affairs, renewable energies, and federal programs that support low-income and middle-class Americans. He serves in the Democratic leadership as Chief Deputy Whip and is a past chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. He sits on the influential Committee on Energy and Commerce, where he serves as the vice chair of the Subcommittee on Health. In addition, he serves as a member of the Subcommittee of Communications and Technology and Energy. In the 116th Congress, Congressman Butterfield also sits on the Committee on House Administration, where he serves as a member of the Subcommittee on Elections. Congressman Butterfield is a lifelong member of Jackson Chapel First Missionary Baptist Church. He is a veteran of the U.S. Army and a proud father and grandfather. Again, welcome to each of you, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
We're going to get right into our questions. Each of you has such a legacy as it relates to your body of service to the citizens of North Carolina, this country, and the world. What would you say is the most important aspect of your legacy? And let's start with Congresswoman Clayton.
If I am answering that for as Congress is concerned, I think it's in agriculture, and I think the fight for allowing the Black farmers to at least sue the government. That was a big deal because they had extended their right to sue. So I had to work with others to give them the extension and the right to sue. And I think my advocacy for those without food and overall, I think my focus on poor people and agriculture and the right to have access to food probably is my strongest piece. And it also has gone into other areas. When I was a county commissioner, I think my ability to bring industry to the county probably is, and fighting the PCB, that was part of, big fight and court action demonstration. So those two pieces of service elected, I think, were my strong suits. I think history will tell what it is, but I think that is, if I'm telling it, that's my say. I think it remains to be seen.
And Congressman Watt.
Well, I think my most important legacy is being mentored by Eva Clayton. She was like my mother when we got to Congress, and it was just a wonderful experience serving with her. To be honest, I never really think of legacy. I kind of believe that just showing up every day and doing what's in front of you on that particular day and trying to do it well is the most important thing for anybody to do. When I'm remembered, maybe at the end of the day, I'll be remembered as one of the chairs of the Congressional Black Caucus. We had a tight, aggressive agenda during my 2-year term as chair. I think I'll be remembered possibly as one of the people who was instrumental in the extension of the Voting Rights Act. Although the Supreme Court didn't like our extension for 25 years as
Right.
much as we liked the extension.
That's right.
And then after Congress, I certainly probably will be remembered as the first African American to preside over the Federal Housing Finance Agency, which had both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the 12, subsequently 11 federal home loan banks under its jurisdiction, and controlled essentially somewhere between 40 and 60% of the United States economy. That was quite an experience for somebody who had grown up like I did. Perhaps somebody will remember that I was the first African American to serve in that capacity, and that during my 5-year tenure, housing went very well. Nothing terrible happened in the housing industry during my 5-year tenure as the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. So, but again, legacies are something that other people worry about.
That's right.
I never worried about having a legacy. I just wanted to show up every day and do the best job I could.
Indeed. And Congressman Butterfield?
Well, first, let me thank you, Valerie, and the NC Black Alliance for allowing us to come on and share these few minutes with you today. I really look forward to this event. Anytime I hear the word history mentioned, I get excited because I certainly know the role that history plays in addressing current conditions that we are addressing today. And so I'm delighted to be with you, and really what makes it very, very special is that I'm sharing the microphone today with two of the most admired individuals in America. And what I want our viewers to know is that I am the youngest of the three. But you talk about legacy, and I agree with Eva and Mel that you don't wake up every morning thinking about your legacy. You just do, you work and do the best you can, and hopefully history in due time will determine what your legacy is. But if there's anything in my legacy that I would want to be regarded for, would be my deep sense of history, my love of history, because everything that we are going through now today can be attributed or compared to what our forefathers and foremothers went through many years ago, especially during the period of Reconstruction. I first came to public life as one interested in civil society and getting involved in the electoral process. I really stepped out onto the stage in 1968. That was 3 years after the passage of the Voting Rights Act. The VRA had passed in August of 1965, and in 1968, we were having tremendous difficulty in getting African Americans registered to vote. Prior to 1965, North Carolina had a literacy test. And so many African Americans were, even those who were literate and could pass a literacy test, there was great reluctance on their part to become registered voters. And so in 1968, we came up with what we thought was a brilliant idea. And that was that we would get an African American dentist from Charlotte named Reginald Hawkins, who was bright and young and aggressive. We would get him to run for governor of North Carolina in 1968. And then we also looked in the eastern part of the state and saw Eva Clayton up in Warren County, married to a very prominent attorney there in Warren County. 4 children. They lived there in Warrenton, and Eva was recruited to run for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District. That was my first introduction in a large way to the electoral process. And each of these individuals, both Clayton and Hawkins, fully understood that they probably would not win that election. But it was motivated in part because they thought that their candidacies would somehow stimulate African American participation in the electoral process. The 1965 Voting Rights Act had eliminated the literacy test. And so their candidacy was simply an opportunity to teach voters and to indicate to voters that voter registration was a possibility. With both of them ran in 1968, and both of them lost. But history should record that their campaigns resulted in thousands of African-American voters being placed on the voter rolls. What history also needs to record is that during that campaign, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had committed himself to come to North Carolina to campaign for voter registration and to indirectly campaign for Hawkins and Clayton. He had committed to be in the state on April 4th, 1968, but we all know what happened on that date. Dr. King diverted his attention away from North Carolina and over to Memphis, Tennessee, and that's where he met his fate. And so if legacy means anything, I hope that my legacy will somehow indicate my love of history and my interest in correlating history to current conditions that exist today. Thank you.
So your responses provide a perfect segue to this next question, and actually the following. Congressman Butterfield, we often say that our ancestors died for us to have the right to vote. That does not seem to resonate with some of our voters who have chosen not to vote or say my vote doesn't count. What do you think will resonate with those voters? And what argument do you give those who will not go to vote and say that their votes don't count?
Well, let me take you back to 1865, not 1965, but 1865, when slavery came to an end. There were 4 million African Americans in this country. African American men were eligible to register to vote. Women could not vote during those days, but men could vote. Women didn't get the right to vote until somewhere around 1920. But history records that 90% of African American men who were voter eligible became registered voters here in North Carolina, and they did great things. They elected 4 African Americans to Congress. There was George Hyman from Warren County, James O'Hara, as I recall, from Halifax County, Henry Plummer Cheatham from the Oxford-Henderson area, and the famous George H. White here in Edgecombe and Craven counties. Those 4 men were elected to Congress during the Reconstruction period, not to mention the dozens who were elected to the state legislature and to positions at the local level. Why did they get involved in politics? They got involved because they knew that sitting at the table and participating in the discussions will make a difference. As Congresswoman Alma Adams says all of the time, if you're not on the menu, you're going to be whatever she says, Valerie. You know what I'm saying. If you're not part of the menu, you're going to be on the menu. And so they were at the table. And so that's what we need to understand today. There is a correlation, a relationship between participating in the electoral process, showing up for meetings of school boards and city councils and county commissions and even the state legislature, being involved, knowing the issues, knowing what they are, being able to debate the issues. I was just in Western Sizzling Restaurant here in Wilson a few minutes ago, and a lady came up to me and confronted me for having on a mask. But I was ready for it. Why? Because I knew the evidence. I knew what to say. And she just said that the CDC was fabricating this pandemic, and that I ought to be ashamed of myself as a congressman buying into the false information about COVID. And so, we've got to know the issues, and that's what I want to impart to those of you listening today. You've got to know what the issues are, both in Raleigh and in Washington. And when you know these issues, you can be prepared to get involved and maybe one day yourself run for the school board or the commission or legislature or the Congress of the United States. You've got to know the issues.
Can I respond also? I think GK is my teacher. I'm his elder, but he is my teacher when it comes to history. He relates it so well. But I also want to pick up on your question. Why do you think now that people are not voting? I think one consideration is we don't connect their lives with voting. We interact with voting at the time of election, 6 months out at the most, 3 months at usually. But we need to find a way as to get them involved in how they improve their lives. And one of the ways, in addition to education, others, is voting. You know, voting isn't something extra. Voting is a part of their health, their education, their employment, their whole being. If we could find ways of, and that's part of our leadership, that's part of our responsibility. We just can't say they should, but we need to find a way of engaging organizations and individuals with the relationship with their very living, their ability for their children, their grandchildren to have better schools, to have opportunities for employment, or good housing. Mel Watson was involved in housing for all Americans, but the access to be a ability to buy a house is the ability to earn a living. And the ability to earn a living is to have access to good schools. It's all integrated. And so we could put that in a way that they could see how valuable. GK just gave the excellent example. People coming out of slavery, you didn't have to convince those men that voting was essential. They wanted to vote. They wanted to vote. So how do we, and we don't have that desperation right now that drives us. So we have to find other incentives to drive us. And the incentive, I think, is connecting people with their very aspiration for living, is to know that voting is one of the ways they can improve the quality of their lives.
So given that, I'm going to switch this question around a little bit, and I'm going to offer it first to Congressman Watt. So we've talked about what the ancestors did to get us to where we are now. So looking at the state of the world right now, what do you think we as a people could do or should have done differently? We just heard from Congresswoman Clayton about how we need to connect voting with our everyday living. What happened that took us away from that? And how do what steps do we take to move us back into that direction?
I don't know that we've moved away from it, except that we don't do it continuously, which is important. Eva talked about connecting through organizations to people on an ongoing basis, not just at election time. And she's a perfect example of that. She's serving on the North Carolina Rural Project Board, that an organization that has continuous contact with people in rural communities and doesn't just do it on an episodic basis. Our problem now is that it takes a crisis, a shooting, a killing, to motivate people. And they don't realize that people are being shot and killed and dying every day because we are not paying attention to things on an ongoing basis. I don't know that we have disconnected. We just not connected on a continuous basis, day after day after day. Democracy and voting is not about just participating at election time. It's about doing what needs to be done in communities and in our own households and in our churches and in our organizations and politically on a day-to-day basis. It's about showing up and participating on a day-to-day basis, not only when there's some kind of crisis.
Correct.
And Valerie, you can overlay that with another complication, and it's the whole campaign and notion of misinformation and disinformation in political campaigns. I am the chairman of the election subcommittee in Congress, and this is something that we've really been studying over the last few months. Social media is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because we can get our message out instantly to millions of people, but it's also a curse because it's not censored. And bad actors can enter into the social space and spread information that's absolutely incorrect. There is misinformation, which is truthful information that is not intended to hurt, but it does hurt people in the process. But then there's disinformation that is false information that hurts people and hurts political campaigns. And the whole notion, and I've invented this, is called malinformation. That is information that is really egregious, information that is just patently false. And we've seen that surface over the last 5 years, and it's getting worse. I won't call names because this is a nonpartisan event, but the whole misinformation, disinformation, malinformation machine is working every day, and it's intended to discourage people from voting and from paying attention to what's happening in our capital.
GK, one of the things, I don't think this is answerable, one of the things is we are in a sense defending, we don't have an offense. We hear the, you said misinformation, we hear the lies, we hear the intentional distortions. Part of it, we feel helpless other than to say, how dare you tell that misinformation? How dare you tell that lie? I feel somewhat helpless in saying, how do we put together an aggressive effort of not necessarily truth telling, but there ought to be not just a reaction that calls someone, you know, out for lying, but to inform, we ought to be aggressively putting the facts out there, you know, so that the misinformation will be hitting up against the truth. But what we have ourselves doing is having to defend, oh, that this was the case. You just misunderstood it, right?
Yeah, yes.
So help me.
You would be happy to know that the Congressional Black Caucus has launched a war room. Maxine Waters insisted that we do this, and about 2 weeks ago we have officially launched a war room, and we go into that room 2 and 3 times a week, and we collaborate. If we come up with creative means by which we can defend against misinformation. Misinformation is a terrible enemy. It is terrible, and it's having an impact. It's affecting us. It is really infecting, and we've got to have 100% turnout in the November election, and we've got to make sure that we get accurate information to our base.
But here's my point, TK, is that it's like you're responding to rather than putting it out.
Yes.
In the war room, if you could be offensively or getting young people engaged and helping us to spread the word. Part of it, they don't listen to us old folks, you know. Now I made it a point to talk to young people. You know, I said this grandmother's gonna talk to young people. Now, you know, sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. My own children don't listen to me, so what do I know? But I'm saying we have to find a way to engage young people in being our ears and eyes and advocacy for the truth, rather than saying, you know, that guy told a lie last week.
Yeah.
Last week. They already put out bad things on Eva Clayton this week, right? Yeah. And Eva Clayton is running for Congress. And you say, oh, that was bad. You follow what I'm saying?
I
So
do. You've been
okay.
talking to Maxine Waters because that's precisely her point. And so that's the whole purpose of the war room now. We're going on the offensive and we're enlisting young people in this army to defend
Yeah.
against misinformation.
Well, we're on the
Yes.
same way.
Yes. And I
And
might say while I have the floor that the Congressional Black Caucus was delighted a few days ago to receive Valerie Foushee. Valerie was in the Capitol and came by the CBC and said hello, and our members just fell in love with her. And thank you, Valerie, for your visit.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I was certainly honored to be before them and to interact with them. I'm going to continue on this course that we are on, particularly as it relates to how we are engaging young folk. And so just tell me, and I'm going to go back to you, Congresswoman Clayton, because you ended on this note. What is your perspective of Generation Z? And for all
Tell me
of
what. Define that for me. You see, y'all in a different language.
this last.
You see, I picked up my phone. I'm getting ready to look it up myself.
This most current generation. As history makers, what are you all doing? And I know you don't like to talk about it in terms of legacy, but what are you doing to transfer that legacy that we talked about to prepare for this generation of leaders? Because the truth is, our next generation of leaders will come from these young folk.
Well, I'm not doing enough, I can tell you. I did start doing the last campaign, grandparents and grandchildren. And the young Democrats got involved a little bit, and the women Democrats got involved. I have, as Mel indicated, I have been supportive of the New Rule Project, which is having conversations in barbershops and having conversation with young people. But I think we all can do more. You know, I don't have the answer to it, but I do find that if we can get young people engaged where they can see themselves engaged, they would be involved. I'm involved in a little bit with agriculture, a little bit now with some of the graduate students who are getting engaged in farming, and I'm encouraging them. And I'm also trying to encourage our public schools to do it. But if they can see how they can do something, you know, I think the more opportunities we give them to show up and show out, as Mel said, show up daily and be recognized, I think we will get some results from that. But it's not something overnight. You have to, again, use Mel's word, we have to have a continuous, effort in that.
And you, Congressman Watt?
Well, I agree with Eva. I don't think any of us are doing enough because it's whatever we're doing is not getting the results that need to be gained. Obviously, I'm trying to be available whenever I'm asked to be available, but in many ways, I feel like I've moved into a whole nother stage of my life where
what is that? What is that? XXX? Is that what is that called?
Yeah, that's Generation Z.
Z.
The digital kids. They've always had access to the internet.
Generation R, which is Generation Retired.
Retired. I'm there with you too.
So,
yeah.
But we definitely need to continue to be available to do these kinds of discussions, to not just drop out completely. GK will get an understanding of how easy and tempting it is to do that at the end of his term, because after you've been at this for a long time, you feel like you deserve, and you certainly feel like you need, whether you deserve a rest or not. you feel like you need a rest, and but we all should be continuing to stay active, and I'm going to try to do that as best I can.
Valerie, I get the feeling that we're winding down, and there's one further point that I'd like to make before we run out of time. We talked a minute ago about the danger of misinformation, and that is certainly very important, but also the danger of losing our cohesion. Mel Watt and Eva Clayton can support me on this. Historically, we have depended upon substantial cohesion within the African American community on the issues of the day. If we are evenly divided 50-50 between A and B, if we're evenly divided, we will not have the political impact that we would have if we were united. And I recall Eva Clayton years ago in a meeting that we had in Warren County, she won't remember this, but she talked about monolith. She gave us a lecture about the African American community is not monolithic, but our goal should be cohesion. And that's true today. If we're going to continue to be distracted because of celebrity, because of misinformation, disinformation, if we're going to be distracted because of apathy, then our vote is going to be greatly divided, and we will not be able to move the needle in the direction that we want to go. So let me just leave you with that. We must have cohesion. It's not going to be automatic cohesion. We don't expect our supporters, our base, to just fall in line. But what I am suggesting is that we study the issues, we show up when we need to show up, and see if we can build a consensus within the African American community. When we do that, we will succeed.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen. Amen.
And you are correct. We are running into our time limit, but we cannot leave this discussion without talking about this historic event. We're celebrating Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson for her historic appointment as the first African-American woman to serve on the United States Supreme Court. And we all heard the ignorant questions. The entire world heard the ignorant questions and felt the overarching energy of racism and blatant disrespect and offensive comments that she was subjected to move to the next level of her esteemed career. Did any of you, and I'm sure you did because this is what we do as we move to serve, think that there would be a day when an African-American woman would serve on the highest court in our country? And what do you see, or what do you think is happening to African-American women in the workplace who, like Judge Brown Jackson, may be smarter than their bosses, but not given the attention, not given the respect, and not given the opportunities that they deserve? I know that's loaded, but I'm sure you all can attack it.
We got to defer to our senior woman mentor to be the first person to address that. I would not dare be the first person to address that question.
I was absolutely heading that way.
Well, I'm honored to be the oldest too in this group. I'm the mother of this group. I was